Hey, Facebook. I am back again because I've done a little bit more research and I kind of want to give you my unbiased opinion about the Jada and Augusta's um, affair. And yesterday, I got to say, I think I was a little bit biased. And I'm a woman, right? So it's hard not to take the side of a woman when you are one. We always want to think, well, when it comes to women, we had a reason to behave or act the way that we do. And it always has to be someone else's fault. But that's not when we had a reason to behave or act the way that we do. And it always has to be someone else's fault. Woman, when you are one, we always want to think, well, when it comes to women, we had a reason to behave or act the way that we do. And it always has to be someone else's fault. But that's not necessarily the case all of the time. Sometimes we act on our own volition, and that's just people, period, right? So,
I don't know, man. Can sisters do math? Why she sit beside her hair like that? I was listening to this podcast a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about relationships and stuff like that. And of course, it was Will It's Me. Shout out to Lisa Tracy, that's the homie. She probably gonna be doing some videos with me in the future. We're supposed to Ben did that, but what she said is why it's hard to talk to women about a lot of issues. Like every conversation comes from this woe is me, I'm a victim thing, and no accountability for what women do, like ever. It's always framed that way. It's always framed from nope. There's no reason why men could want to exit the community or want to be with other people or whatnot. Y'all just doing everything right, sugar and spice and everything nice, and it's always hard to engage in that. I was on a post and they were talking about the rappers. Of course, that's their go-to. Well, this rapper said this and whatever, and I'm just like, well, you do have a bunch of black women who write books that encourage women to hop the fence specifically to get with white men. You do know that, right? Then they dismiss the grass and the reach. I'm like, no, women read. Their audiences read their books and their blogs. Like their reach is not as global as hip hop, but it definitely targets their audience. So they minimize when you make the point, like, for every Tommy there's a Cola Booth, right? But it's hard to engage in these conversations because when you look at the data, that's you better tell me a more favorite word. It tells a different story, and I'm just like, yeah, I really be tripping over the 15% of men that hop, and then there's a total. I was thinking that's weird too, because like a lot of these your online conversations are pouring over onto YouTube. I mean, to like regular conversations on Facebook and whatnot. But the bad stuff that's going on with women is totally dismissed. Oh, I don't feel that way. I don't know anybody who thinks like that. I'm like, yo, it's channels of black Tommies. Most of the black men who went in like that, like most of them are gone off YouTube, and they had to change the way they did their content, right? Because you just can't do that. But you can have a Deborah Cooper, you can have a Cola Booth, you can have Crystal Cray Cray, the Brooklyn Blues, Cynthia. Like you can have all those single, not successful lady. You have the bootleg Crystal and Kerosene. You can have all these women have all their channels and just talk shit all day, right? Azalea and Banks tweeted some crazy shit like a week before, like 2 weeks ago, and it was some like messed up stuff. Like this, I'm like the stuff that I'm like, y'all accused Tommy Lauren of doing, but she's never said anything remotely close to what Amber Phillips has said, or even Azalea Banks. And we didn't. It wasn't no think pieces. There was no articles written about it. Like most men just ignored that shit. That's what you do to trolls. You ignore them. But for whatever reason, women are different, right? I get that. They, look at one little. They go where they're not celebrated, and they want to go to the people who don't like them, and beg for attention, like little puppies. But this entire clip of them talking was all about stuff you can't even like calculate. You can't even like substantiate. Rather, that's what I mean. It's just off of her limited experiences and like, damn. So how do we argue against these conversations when like most black men I know are with black women? Like, I mean, I don't know. And then there's the other conversation. Well, if they're not enough, if they're not melanated enough, that's a different conversation. You're gonna get in trouble with. Ask your boy Talib Kweli. But yeah, some of these conversations is just engaging women is like it's hard. It's like I can't do it. Like if all your own personal experiences is all your examples of everything that you have to say, and you point to celebrity life all the time, and then you never promote or push or celebrate what you claim you want to see. You major in the minors. You can't do math. But I ain't gonna talk no more. I'm gonna just let you listen to these ladies discuss the problems with the black community and how black women are just waiting on the black man to come back home and stop hopping the fence. And there's no reason because we've been down for the cause and we always been here for you. Mind you, there's a whole platforms of black women on YouTube that are burning the caves, even though they still complain about things that they claim they burnt the cave for already. And they're divesting and they're getting out of Blackistan. But yet, that never gets addressed. We don't never hear nothing about them women. Oh boy. I'm out.
Negative impact long term if we don't start to address those thought processes.
That's really good. And I saw where Kenneth, please tell us, and we want to hear from men. So men, if you disagree, I'm glad Kenneth say disagree. So we're gonna address his statement. Please share with us then. If you disagree, Kenneth, give us what your assertion
I would love
of this scenario is. Because I agree, Winter. I believe, and we've seen it in sports. I've actually was talking to one of my friends who's very successful here in Oklahoma, and he said a lot of people think that he dates white women because of what he does, and he does not.
Yes.
And it's just his preference, but they just assume because he's successful in what he does that he dates white women. And so there's something that we've correlated with success. And we look at the NBA players, the NFL players. We look at a lot of, hey, baby, Sydney, thank you for joining. We look at all of these prominent men, and we see what do? They got a black woman that's struggling with them in the beginning. Real talk. Struggling with them in the beginning, taking care of their black babies. And then they get a level of success. Hello, Crystal. And then they get a white woman. So if that is not the case, Kenneth, we do want to hear from men. Please know that this is not at all bashing, but we're really wanting to have a real dialogue to create some understanding. So Kenneth says, I respectfully yet strongly disagree with the statement that we black men see white women as status or acceptance approval. So let us know then, Kenneth. Maybe you can add a little bit more comment to that.
I would love. So that's a great comment. I would love to know from his perspective, because again, this is a some, not all.
Absolutely.
So for a man that doesn't feel that way, who's on the opposite, I would love to hear your thought process and why, because whether we like it or not, it's still very prevalent. My ex-husband played in the NFL. Let me tell you, it's very prevalent that a lot of the players marry outside of their race. It's just a reality. And so I think it's a conversation we don't really want to have because it's like the elephant in the room. But it's a very big elephant in the room. And I think at some point, I think a lot of black women want to ask, why? When did that happen? What are we missing? And you can't sit here and say that there are not black and white women available at those levels. I know that for myself not to be true.
Absolutely.
So what is the difference? What's making the mass shift? And so I think it's a valid question. I think it's a courageous question, but I would love to hear from men who have made that decision, what prompted it? And then what was their challenge? Because again, my son, for instance, he's a student athlete. He goes to a predominantly white school. If I'm being honest, there's not a whole lot of black girls at his school. So when he first started, he was allowed to date at 16. And I started asking him, like, who was he interested in? It was a white girl. And I have nothing against that. And I get it. Most of the girls in his class are white. What do you do when that's predominantly what is around you? So I get it. And I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong, but I think too, there is some sort of conditioning that we are not acknowledging in that aspect. Again, your preference is your preference, but I think when you have, I can't remember who it was recently that made a statement, Black man that's just engaged to the Asian lady that is on The Real.
Yeah, I know what you're talking. I don't know his name. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. And he made a statement that was very alarming. Very alarming. And when we have comments made by someone in his position on such a massive level, I'm sorry, but that sends a message.
It does.
And it sends a strong message that doesn't support the progressiveness of Black women and our perception and the general public's perception at large. Jeezy, yes, I couldn't remember his name. Jeezy. I'm sorry, I don't listen to stuff like that, so I couldn't remember his name. But so I just was like, what are we doing? Why is that acceptable to say? I don't think Black women haven't. Well, some do. Let me just say that. Let me go back. Some do. But for those of us like myself, I don't care who people end up with.
Right.
Love who you love, marry who you marry. But I don't feel like that has to be on the back of downing Black women.
Absolutely. For sure.
And I just, that's unfortunate that we get into
where, because we've been in the struggle. You know what I mean? When we look back at our history, Black mothers have been raising Black children by themselves, Black men by themselves. So where did it become a conversation? And I'm going to be really raw, y'all, with my words tonight, so forgive me if it offends anybody. But where did we go into the place where we went from protecting our Black men? We went from, making sure that, we were in our slave homes, that we were hiding our men and protecting them and all these things. And we went from that. We went to the Black power struggle. We did all these things. And then we come on the other side, and then we become the bitches and the hoes. So where do you think, how do you think that shifted from an honor and a love and a respect and a family unit to now we see, like you said, Black women not feeling honored and valued by the very men in their community? Where do you think this happened?
So there's a deep-seated brokenness that the Black community has at large. And I think if we're being raw and honest, what happened and what started to transpire is that as Black people began to get more opportunity, the Black men still found it almost like, I don't want to say a badge of honor, but they continued to kind of progress in arenas, and they almost saw achieving relationships with women of opposite races as a step in the right direction as to being accepted at large. And so there's still this brokenness, though, that's at the root of that, if we're being honest, because it's still this mentality of proving, and that I feel like I can't be equal or in some aspects better than if I'm not able to play in the same playgrounds. Like I can't feel equal to if I have a Black woman beside me and at my side and marry, that concept of a Black power couple is still progressing. We still have a lot of work to do, right? So a lot of Black men feel like they haven't arrived, or really they don't feel accepted by their white counterparts until they have what they would call a token, wife, a white wife, a mixed race wife. So it's now Black women against mixed race women, like because of this mentality that Black men have from a place of brokenness, still trying to compete and feel relevant and accepted. And so I think what we need to acknowledge at the end of the day is that this is really just an exposing of how much healing needs to take place in the Black community. And so it's unfortunate, and I'm not trying to be condescending when I say that, but it's saying something when a Black man feels like he has arrived because he is able to date a white woman or a mixed race woman because she may in some aspects in their mind be more beautiful than a Black woman. We have to start tearing down those stereotypes and redefining what beauty is. And so it's a collective effort. It's a collective mission that we all should have to really break down these racial disparities that we see both outside and inside our community. It's not just racism from an outside perspective. We are doing it, and we are really challenging each other on the inside. I mean, I remember being called ugly by a Black boy. I'm being honest. I remember being called too white by a Black sister.
Yeah.
So these are some racial disparities that we've adopted within our own communities. So there has to be healing that takes place internally before we really can see healing take place externally.
It's going to be specifically in that vein of this space. So I know God is healing things, and even in our relationships, and us understanding each other better.
Yes.
So one of the first questions I want to ask you is, what do you think when Black women, what do you think as a Black, oh God. Okay, here it is. What do you think Black women want their Black men to know about us?
That we love them. I think it's interesting. We see a lot of mixed race couples these days, but for the most part, when I speak to Black women at large, they desire to partner with the Black king. Ultimately, it's not necessarily us that desires to step outside of our race and date and marry. We do have a desire to be partnered in purpose and partnered in matrimony with a Black king. So number one, we love you. But two, we want to feel desired and wanted by you, and not to be made to feel like we are less than or somehow not exotic enough, and that we are worthy of being protected just like they would protect anyone else. And I know that's a strong thing to say, but it's a reality for a lot of Black women. We don't feel protected by our Black men. We don't feel held in very high regard. You know, I've heard just crazy things said about Black women by Black men. And so I think it's an honest comment to make when I say we want to feel protected, we want to feel desired, and we want to feel esteemed. So I think we're seeing a huge shift in this, and I'm hopeful that a lot of Black men will hear us and hear our desire, that we're with them. It's not we don't want to be bitter.
Yeah.
I know there are a lot of us that are, but at large, that bitterness comes from a heart of hurt and a heart of rejection and a heart of pain and a heart of feeling like we've been cast aside and somehow made to feel as if we're not worthy in some aspects compared to some of our Hispanic or Caucasian sisters. And so we just want to we really want to be heard, and we really want to be loved. So at the end of the day, we love them. We want to be heard by them. We want to be loved by them, and we want to be desired by them, and not to feel like we have to work twice as hard. Not only are we fighting our way in mainstream society to feel relevant, we're now in a fight in our own race to feel relevant amongst our own Black men.
Wow. Like,
how do we get pushed down to the bottom of the totem pole among men in our own race? How do we come behind, women that aren't even, Black women? And so I just think we want to be validated by our Black brothers. I can't, I know this is not pretty. There's no nice way to say it, but I think if Black women were honest and had the platform and the voice, they would reiterate what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I know it's not an easy thing to say. We don't want to come across as if we're beating up Black men. We love you, honestly. We love you, and we're down for the cause.